Good afternoon, everyone. Whoops, a little stumble on the words there. I want to welcome everyone today to Stories That Inspire Us with Janice. Today, I have an amazing guest on. I can't wait for her to share her story with us. And stories is our stories developed from the heart. And just wanted to pass that along. Today, I want to welcome Hannah Jefferson. Thank you so much for being on the Stories That Inspire Us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Grateful to be here.
Oh, you're so welcome. Now, Hannah, I know that, excuse me, you are an intuitive healer.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes when people hear intuitive and healer in the same context, I guess it could be a little confusing to some people that they don't understand that, but you've devoted this practice to empowering others to
Mhm.
reconnect with their bodies, speak from their heart, and step bravely into the healthiest versions of themselves. So, who tell us more about that? I'm so excited to get involved with this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a kind of general who I am and what I do perspective, I am first and foremost an acupuncturist. So working with mind, body, spirit, using Chinese medicine and acupuncture needles to help, as we said, the body to heal from within, to help us to reconnect with our bodies and understand what signs and symptoms mean. So oftentimes it can lead to greater body awareness and preventative health as well. And for me, I also am a Reiki 2 certified, and I also do life coaching. So I like to combine all three of those modalities though, within any treatment that I provide, because I think that using more than one modality at once, and using intuition for myself to know what piece of the puzzle is going to, fit in here or go over here to help elicit the greatest results for whoever I'm working with is super, super important. So there's usually a little element of each in each of my acupuncture treatments, that is. And so, just from a kind of general standpoint, I think that, so much of our healing must, and most of it truly must begin from within with ourselves. And, for me, what got me into this work and reconnecting with my intuition and healing myself in so many ways is finding this medicine. And I found this medicine originally because I was home from college and dealing with a great deal of anxiety for a variety of reasons. I do have a history of childhood sexual abuse from a very young age, which, left me with a great deal of trauma stored within. And it was kind of tucked away for many years. And then when I went away to college, that was a big transition. And I was, I think, old enough for my body to start processing what had happened. And so a lot of phenomena, mentally, physically, spiritually, started presenting itself. And because of that, I ended up coming home from school and just kind of wanting to reground myself, get some support, figure out what I wanted to do, because there was some aspects at play in terms of what I wanted my career path to be. And my mom suggested that I try acupuncture because she was seeing someone for, whatever it was at the time. And I remember distinctly, because I had been on medication, I was talking to a counselor, I tried a couple other things. And, I saw this acupuncturist, she put some needles in my body and left the room. And I felt this surge of energy through my body like I had never felt before. And I had always been an intuitive young person. And there were a lot of little things here and there that I now know was deep intuition and energy movement, but I didn't have the vocabulary to identify it at the time. But after, learning all of this, I do. And I remember after that first session, just feeling such peace and grounding and just openness in my body and mind and spirit in a way that I had never experienced before. And I was like, I love this. I want more of this. I got to try this again. And then throughout the rest of college, it kind of kept popping up in my life in different ways. And then after graduating college, I took a year off and was really trying to think, what do I want to do? I want to be a healer, a helper in some way. And acupuncture just kept popping up in my intuition, in my life in different ways. And that led me to, going to school for it and, eventually being in this space that I'm in now. But, I think that so many healers out there started from being in the patient chair to being in the practitioner chair, because this medicine is so powerful. And if you naturally have that desire within you to be in a helping profession and to support others, and then you experience a certain kind of medicine that really resonates with you, I think it's just a beautiful segue into something that's going to be healing long-term for you, and, being able to walk hand in hand with your patients and say, this is how this works. This is how it worked for me. This is how it's worked for so many others. And I can show you how we can facilitate change and why it's so important.
Wow. So I just want to back up a little bit. I was writing
Sure.
fast here. Obviously, we had a pre-podcast chat, but what I find so amazing, one of the things that I find very amazing about your story is you went through such a traumatic event as a young child, and not being able to process it. Fast forward, you go off to college, you sought out the assistance of another acupuncturist. Then you took a year off, and you felt that calling to be an acupuncturist. Maybe not initially, if I'm understanding this correctly, but that subject kept coming up for you. And I'm getting tingles thinking about it, because as you said, it's that movement of energy. And from a traumatic experience, going through a process and then wanting to deliver or enhance someone else's life with those different modalities is just, I'm blown away.
Thank you.
Wow. Now, you would also mention that, along with being an acupuncturist, you do life coaching as well as Reiki. And I know that a lot of people don't understand what Reiki is, but it's another, and please correct me if I'm wrong because you are the expert, it's another form of moving energy. And it's nice that you are able to use qualities from each thing that you do. Your waiting list for clients must be extensive.
I'm very blessed, that's for sure.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, can you explain a little bit more to us about Reiki?
Yeah, so Reiki is another form of energy healing. It dates back a very long time, similar to Chinese medicine, not quite as far back as Chinese medicine, but essentially when you're working with a client, instead of placing needles, you are using, so basically when you get trained to do Reiki, you're passed down energy and symbols and basically transmission of how you're going to essentially be a channel for that energy. It's almost like the way I envision it is like each person has a little bank of energy up there in the universe, or however you want to define it. And my job is to be a channel to help bring that down, and so that person can harness and access it on a deeper level. And so whether we're looking to kind of move stuck energy or build energy up when it's deficient or something else entirely, we start oftentimes from the head and work our way down. And whether it's, actually placing, like touching the body or hovering directly above it, we're essentially working to support the opening, unblocking, building, grounding. Essentially, manipulation sounds like maybe a negative word, but we're working with and partnering with your chi to facilitate healing and movement to kind of keep the circuit open and flowing in a healthy way.
And that's amazing too, because I think a lot of people, don't realize the healing benefits of how that can really help them through, maybe it's trauma, maybe
Mhm.
it's, the everyday stresses, regardless of what it is, that it can help motivate that energy to move in such a way to, release the negative energy. And as
Mhm.
you said you had that, like that major uplifting, like you just felt like so grounded and like,
Mhm.
that this type of work I think always amazes me, because
Mhm.
we don't really realize what the true potential is with this type of work.
Mhm.
And
Abs- Absolutely. Yeah. And it always amazes me too, because it's been around for thousands of years. And, even though they, in school, they give you a lot of the puzzle, because, you need a solid foundation in which to start practicing. And that being said, I mean, every single day I learn something new, whether it's about a certain particular point that's going to be useful, whether it's a combination, whether it's just something about the way that I practice, or something new about a patient. There's so many layers to it, and there's so much space for gray area and individuality in terms of treatment strategies. And so often we live from the neck up in our lives these days, right? We're thinking, we're talking, we're all up here, and we forget that we have all of this other stuff down here, other than to get us from place to place. And so, the body is just so wise, and it always knows what it needs and will speak to us if we are open to listening. And so I think a big piece in terms of all of this work, but acupuncture and Reiki especially, is getting us not out of here, but back into the rest of our being, and starting to have that dialogue, and starting to listen and create space for things like trauma or disease, patterns of disharmony in our body to come up and out and release, so that we can have that long-term healing, and not just getting rid of the headache temporarily, sort of thing.
right, because, again, I think it goes back to the different things that somebody may be dealing with. And when you say, for instance, listening to what your body is telling you, that's also intuitive, but to be able to put all of that together in such a way. And I think sometimes too, it's not what we say to ourselves or what our body is feeling, but it's the intuitive nature. Like, okay, here's this thing going on. Now, what do I do with it?
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back a little bit more to about what you experienced as a young child, because I think that's so important for people to, that may be listening, excuse me, a viewer or a listener who may be listening to the podcast, maybe they have experienced that and
Yeah.
they don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Can you make, as an expert in this field, can you make some recommendations for someone for anybody listening, as
Mm-hmm.
to what they can do or whom they can contact?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just from a contact standpoint, there's a variety of options out there now, which is really wonderful. And I think that more and more people are feeling safer to come out and share their experience. But, just from a you to me standpoint, outside of like listing organizations that can support you, because that you can certainly Google.
Sure.
Um, first, I think it's really important to, depending on where you are in your process, is to admit to yourself that something has occurred. And, whether you write it down or you say it to yourself, but just putting it out there so that it is out of your body you know, in a way, it's almost like when you do like an unconscious word dump kind of thing, or just doing, you know, journaling about it, doing something that makes it feel like it's kind of out of your body and onto a page or out into the universe. It doesn't have to be speaking it to anyone right away if you're not ready, but just starting to almost admit to yourself that something has occurred and that it's okay to speak it aloud or write it down or something of that nature. And then, you know, telling somebody would be the next step. And that can be the scariest one for a variety of reasons. You know, for me, I was 6 years old. And so I had been told by the person who did this, who was my babysitter at the time, that I would get in trouble. And so, you know, I didn't want to share for a while because I was afraid of getting in trouble. But obviously, if you're, even if you're an adult and this has happened, you know, there can be so many different emotions linked with this, you know, the shame and blame of things that have happened, the shoulding that can happen is all very normal and very okay. And I definitely recommend to share anyway, because it is never your fault. And the more you speak to it and the more support you get around it, the easier and easier it will be to see that in time. And then, you know, definitely finding a therapist, a counselor, somebody who, especially somebody who specializes in trauma, because that is, you know, working with someone who, especially if it's a fresh experience, or even if it's not really, it's important to have somebody who understands how the mind is working, how the body is working, how the nervous system is reacting in response to that event, and knowing how to, the best ways to support you and to kind of start to talk about, you know, whatever the event is, in a way that feels safe and comfortable. And then, you know, from there, it's taking it one baby step at a time, and knowing that healing is not linear. You know, so often I hear from my clients, they say, you know, I just want to be happy. I just want to move through this grief. I just want to be on the other side. And that is human nature. And, you know, we live in a world of instant gratification, you know, in so many ways. And we want to just be there, and we want to just zoom through the work. And, you know, depending on what's happened, it might take a little while, it might take a long while, it might be a journey that you're on in some form for the rest of your life. And there's no right or wrong way to do it, and there's no time limit. And I think just anything that you do for yourself in terms of self-healing, you know, talking to somebody, seeing an acupuncturist, seeing a Reiki practitioner, spending time outside, you know, cultivating a close group of people in your life that you can trust, you know, moving your body in a way to help keep the chi flowing, you know, any of those practices. Every time you do that for yourself, that will be reconnecting you to your own body in a positive way, which is also incredibly important.
Oh my gosh, it really is. And, you know, there's an incident which occurred, but I think for when you go through something from like that, and I'm speaking from experience, it's not only the emotional part of it, it's so many different facets. It's the physical part, it's a physiological part. And when one of them is off, everything is off. And having that outlet, or that close knit of people that you can talk to, you know, looking back on your journey, when you had mentioned that it kept coming up for you, because I know what had happened to me comes up frequently and at different times when I don't even expect it. And I know that I'm on the other side. However, what I'm trying to say is it's always there. And I have like my own little toolbox. For instance, you know, the pandemic, of course, brought out so much stress and anxiety for everyone. and I felt that, excuse me, I felt that as well. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get my toolbox out, and these are the things I really need to focus on, whether it is the journaling, whether it is, talking to someone, or, just being able to verbalize out loud what has happened. And I've even, a couple times have filmed myself just for prosperity's sake, so that I can like go back to it and say, all right, that was kind of a crappy day, but you know what? I got my toolbox out, and I, did these things, and now I feel better. So it's something that I think is always with us and always will be, but there are ways to kind of, when those things pop up, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Do you have your own type of toolbox?
Definitely. And I will say that the importance of having a key piece of that in response to what you're saying is that the event will never go away. Like, you can't change the past. And I think so often people say, I just want to forget it. And I think that, healing, there's always more layers. And, as we're learning and growing and evolving, things might pop up and you think, oh, wow, I didn't think about it that way, or I wasn't expecting to feel that today. And so being very gentle and patient with yourself is important. And the more healing work you do, the more it will turn from a trigger to a memory. And so it might, like, it's never gonna be erased from time. And when it comes up, it might be like, oh, that's right, that thing that happened. And I'm gonna take a few deep breaths and let it carry on and go away, versus, thinking about it and having like a full-blown panic attack. So, and that, sometimes that comes up as well, depending on where you are. But I think that for me, that's always been the goal in terms of my own work for myself and with my clients, is not trying to change the past, but trying to release some of the physical and mental triggers associated with the event. And so to answer your question, I would say there's several things that I do. For me, movement is a huge meditation. I think oftentimes people think that in order to be able to meditate, they have to be still and silent, and their brain has to be blank, and that's peace. And while that is one form of meditation, meditation is, I think, a practice of observing your thoughts and letting them pass through and being in the present moment with whatever comes up. To me, that's what meditation is. And so for me, going for a run, or, doing some yoga pose stretching, or just going for a walk, or anything to just get my blood moving and my chi flowing, that's very, very calming for me and very grounding. Especially if you can walk outside, like in the grass with bare feet. That's like connecting to the energetic vibration of the earth is super, super powerful. Another big one for me is taking Epsom salt baths. And that was a practice that was very, very highly recommended in acupuncture school, because it helped very much to kind of detox your body, not only on a physical level, but also an energetic level. So, after a long day of treating patients, if there's been a lot going on, I'll take an Epsom salt bath and just allow everything to release, anything that my body or mind might be holding on to that doesn't need to be there anymore. And it's just relaxing. A nice bubble Epsom salt bath is just calming for the mind in general. So that's a good one. I would say, honestly, drinking extra water. I know that's a very simple one, but water is so cleansing, so purifying, so detoxifying. And I think oftentimes there's a variety of reasons why we can have trigger responses or, different things happening. And I think, honestly, the more hydrated we are, the less triggered we might become. It's almost like if you're hungry, if you're thirsty, if you haven't gotten enough sleep, these kind of basic human needs, if we aren't taking care of those things, it's much easier for us to, instead of, if we have something come up, it might be a little irritating, but if we're taking care of ourselves really well, it might become like a 3 or a 4, versus if we're starving and our blood sugar is crashing and we didn't get enough sleep last night and we're super dehydrated, we're going to go to a 10 or like a 15 right away in terms of that nervous system reaction. So, I mean, there's a million ways to do it, but I think just consistent self-care. You know, I
Yes.
see a therapist every week. I give myself acupuncture every week. I, move my body, 4 or 5 days a week as much as I can. Like, so being really consistent about self-care and not waiting until you're behind the ball, like that preventative wellness and preventative care, I think, is probably the biggest one.
I love that you said that, because I know for me that it's certainly helped a lot. And I have some clients as well that has certainly helped them. And
Mm-hmm.
I always think it's amazing too, that when we kind of, pause for a moment and really focus on that self-care. For instance, I write it in my calendar because
Mm-hmm.
that way there's so much, pen to paper, there's that connection. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like what you said, that sometimes you will go out in the grass with your walk in your bare feet.
Mm-hmm.
So your feet are connecting with the ground, which is connecting with the earth, the energy of the earth. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's just so much to that. I mean, and people may have to experience with what works with them, but
Definitely.
for instance, if they wanted to reach out to you, how would they get a hold of you?
Yes. So I hang out the most on Instagram. I would say I try to be not on social media as much. That is a goal of mine recently. But my business account is at Soul and Loon Wellness. So SOULAND wellness at the end. And then soulandloonwellness.com is my website. And then they can reach me by email if they want. It's hannah@soulandloonwellness.com.
That's
And
fantastic.
all the same across the board. Yeah, of course.
Thank you for sharing all that information. And your story, I know, will inspire so many people. And I just wonder if you have any, I don't want to say last words, but any additional comment, like what pops
Mm-hmm.
into your mind? Like, there's somebody out there that needs to hear from you something else. And what would that something else be for you?
Yeah. It's funny because I asked my podcast guest the same question, and I call it nuggets of wisdom. Let's see. I would say there's no right way to heal, and everyone's journey is unique, and every tiny step you take forward, even if it's just taking a few cleansing breaths in the morning when you wake up, every small step matters. And celebrate those little wins, because that will, if you take those tiny steps every day, in a year, you'll look back and you will be absolutely amazed at how far you've come.
Wow, that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing
Absolutely.
that. So appreciate that. Folks, Hannah's story is unique, is different, but is also the same for so many different people out there. If you're hearing our voice, if you hear what Hannah has chatted about today, and yes, it is a sensitive subject matter, we realize that, but this is the point of stories that inspire us, so that you can feel, so that you can hear and connect with to whom you ever need to connect to. Hannah, I can't thank you enough for sharing your very raw, vulnerable, very sensitive, but yet very intuitive and very healing chat today. And I'm forever grateful for you to be in this space with me today.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me on and allowing me to share.
You are so welcome. Now, everyone, I want you to come back often and know that you have a story, whether you think it or not. There's a story behind the story. If you are empowered to share your story, please don't hesitate to reach out. My name is Janice Malillo, and I am the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, it was inspired by Hannah Jefferson. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you real soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.